Hello and welcome to another in the 10-minute tip series. This one is titled How to Improve Interactions with Sales. My name is Michael Dennis and I will be your presenter today. Let's begin with an introduction. As most of us know, the typical credit department is often viewed as being at odds with the sales department. And of course this results in jokes like credit equals sales prevention. In my opinion, the push and pull, the give and take between sales and credit is actually a good thing, or more specifically, it's good for the company. It's difficult, it's stressful, but it results in better decisions. More about that idea later in this presentation. By way of introduction, disagreements between the credit department and the sales department are unavoidable. We are going to disagree about things like whether or not an applicant company qualifies for open account terms. We're going to disagree about whether or not an account should be placed on credit holds. So disagreements are unavoidable, but personal conflicts may be avoidable. Arguments may be avoidable. Disagreements are unavoidable. Generally speaking, the disagreements between the credit department and the sales department relate very specifically to the amount of credit risk that is acceptable to the company. And when we talk about credit risk, really we're talking about two things: the risk of late payment and the risk of non-payment. So typically, the best thing that we can do in this context is to make sure that we, the credit department, understands our company's tolerance for late payment and for payment default. And once we are able to do that, we are in a strong position to influence our interactions with the customer and our interactions with the sales department. Let's talk for a few minutes about the ways in which relationships in the typical interactions between the credit department and the sales department get damaged. They can be damaged in any number of ways, including these. As a result of honest mistakes. The credit department is not infallible. Our decision making is subject to human error. So there can be honest mistakes and there can be dishonesty, and both of those damage relationships with sales. There can be misunderstandings on both sides. And for that reason, I think it's important that we focus on ensuring that the message we're delivering to the salesperson is easily understood, it's readily understood, and that in fact it is understood. Clearly, another way in which the credit-sales relationship is damaged routinely is because the credit department and the sales department have different goals and they have different timelines. And let me give you an example of that. The sales department goal is sell, sell, sell as quickly as possible. The credit department's goal is different in terms of timeline. Our timeline is to make timely decisions when we have sufficient information to make an informed decision. That's not the same as quickly as possible. So clearly we have different timelines, and that is a cause of stress. That is a potential cause of conflict between credit and sales. Another way in which relationships get damaged is when one party or the other has unreasonable expectations. For example, if you're a salesperson and you've worked for 6 months to try to qualify a new applicant company, to try and convince them that you're the company for them. The salesperson has gone out of his way, she's met with this customer any number of times, and they finally got around to convincing the customer to complete an application. They've convinced them that your company's pricing and your products and your after-sales service are superior. And as a result, they got the application. And of course their expectation is it'll be approved promptly, the customer will get the credit limit that they want and need, and the company and the salesperson will profit as a result of higher sales. Well, what if those are unreasonable expectations? What if after 6 months of effort, the answer in response to the credit application is this customer doesn't qualify for open account terms, or this customer qualifies for a relatively small credit limit, not the credit limit that they want, need, expect, and require. Another potential for damaging relationships between sales and credit are missed deadlines, and another is calls and messages that you do not return promptly when the salesperson calls. Another big source of frustration and a big source of damage to the relationship is inconsistent credit decision making, along with incorrect decisions and or incoherent decisions. In addition, unprofessional and unethical behavior is a source of conflict, as is backstabbing, a lack of respect, poor communications, miscommunication, and of course in any situation, and it doesn't have to be between sales and credit, it could be between any two parties when one party insists that there is only one right answer. Let's talk about faster, because faster is usually better. And we, the credit department, can in fact shorten turnaround times on credit applications and orders in the credit hold queue in a number of different ways, including but not limited to by refining the policies and procedures. Now, for some companies, and I'm a consultant, for some companies, I know you don't have policies and procedures. At least you don't have formal written policies and procedures. And I think that's a problem. You can shorten turnaround time clearly if you delegate authority. If only one person in the credit department has the authority to release orders that are in the credit hold queue, and that person is sick, at lunch, on vacation, whatever, there's a vacuum. And that can be filled. That vacuum can be filled if you delegate authority. And it doesn't have to be that you're out of the office or sick or on vacation. If there's only one person approving, that's a problem even if that person's in a meeting, on a phone call, whatever, at the dentist. It doesn't have to be a life-changing event. It can be just routine, and as a result of not delegating decision-making authority, things like credit applications are not being reviewed in a timely manner, and or orders on the credit hold queue are not being released quickly enough. You can shorten turnaround time by making certain that escalations happen within the credit department. For example, let's assume that you have a goal of a turnaround time of 10 working days for the typical credit application. What you don't want to have is a scenario in which a credit application has been languishing for 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 days because someone didn't know what to do with it, didn't have all the information they needed to complete the process, and didn't understand, wasn't given instructions that there's a need to escalate. Rather than just watching this credit application get old, they need to do something with it, and that's an escalation. You can shorten turnaround time by rewarding decisiveness in the credit decision-making process and by punishing indecisiveness. You have to get off the fence at some point. You have to make a commitment. Either we're shipping or we're not, we're approving or we don't. We have to decide, and we decide when we have sufficient information to make the decision, not perfect information with which to make the decision. Another idea is to standardize the application review process. In other words, what do we do when we get a credit application? What are the 8 steps that we take in order to gather information with which we can make an informed decision? And as I mentioned earlier, a key to faster turnaround, of course, is making the decisions when you have sufficient information, not perfect information. There's 2 problems with getting perfect information. It takes too long, and it costs too much money. And the costs are twofold. One is the actual cost of gathering perfect information, and the other is an opportunity cost. There's a loss that occurs when you're not making decisions quickly enough. Sometimes it's the loss of interest on the part of the applicant. Sometimes it's a frustrated customer in the context of an order that's been in the credit hold queue for too long. Faster is better continued. Remember that sales is being paid, is being compensated, is being encouraged, is being rewarded and recognized to get the order and sell it as quickly as possible. In contrast, the credit department is focused on the customer's ability to pay, not the customer's ability to issue a purchase order. So as we mentioned earlier, this results in different timelines. The salesperson wants it to happen now, the decision to happen now, the order to be released now, the credit application to be approved now, and the credit department wants to ensure, to make certain that there's a reasonable expectation that the customer can and will pay the invoices as they come due. One of the things that we can do is we can inform, we can educate the sales team about the idea that this decision-making process takes time. It's not, we're not spinning a wheel. We're not tossing a dart at a dartboard. We're trying to make informed decisions, and that requires expertise. It requires information. It requires analysis, and importantly, it requires time. Now, nothing can be done in terms of the stress that this creates in the context of the relationship between sales and credit. But if the stress over the timeline, over their need for it now and your desire to make a better informed decision, if that turns into conflict between sales and credit, that's where senior management needs to become involved. They need to be aware of it. Potentially, they need to intervene, because that type of conflict is entirely unhealthy for the relationship between sales and credit. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and attention. This is a 10-minute tips presentation. I hope you found it to be interesting and helpful. If you might be interested in hearing the entire program, which is available on demand, please do contact the sponsoring association or organization. And please have a great day. Thanks.